So here we go. We're going to compare and contrast the HOKA One One Mach 5 versus the Nike Vomero 16 in terms of which shoe is the better daily trainer. Let's get into it. So what is up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Filip Latocha, and as you can already guess by the intro, we are comparing the HOKA One One Mach 5 versus the Nike Vomero 16 in terms of which one would be the better daily trainer overall. So that's a pretty loaded question, especially when it comes to these two shoes. So buckle up. So before we get into it, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're already subscribed, watching content. Thanks so much. Love you guys a lot. The specs for both shoes are here respectively. And before we get into it, also, follow me on Instagram, follow me on Strava for some other updates for Chicago Marathon training stuff that's coming around. And yeah, it's overall a pretty good time. So again, specs for both shoes up here. Let's begin with the newer shoe of the two, which is the Mach 5. So in size 8.5, after using the shoe, so it probably has some sweat in it, the shoe does come at about 8 ounces, 8.1 ounces, depending, accordingly to those factors. And some of the different specs already that you can probably already see is that there's a 29 millimeter heel and a 24 millimeter forefoot, which gives us a 5 millimeter offset in this shoe. So that's the first noticeable thing, is that this is going to be more of a neutral landing shoe for that midfoot kind of strike. Although it could do well with a forefoot strike if, you can kind of get into the rhythm of being able to do so. So that's kind of what I do, and it has its effects on the shoe, which we'll talk about here in a second. So now we move into the Vomero 16 in terms of its general specs. This Vomero 16 in size 8.5, I think, is about 10.1, 10.2 ounces normally. The heel is, I think, about 29.5 millimeters, and the forefoot is like 18.5. I might have those numbers slightly mixed up. I think that sounds about right, though. And the offset for this particular shoe is like about 10 millimeters. So again, it's a Nike signature, I suppose, to have more of that toe-bound forefoot striking area for this particular shoe because of the technologies associated with it as well. So also something we'll get into as we start breaking down the shoe more. But also worth noting is this is one of these unique examples where the woman's size also has a different offset. I don't have its numbers quite, but I know that the heel is slightly less, I believe, in the women's size for the Vomero 16, but something I can write down somewhere on the specs here on the side as well. What else can we go into? So that's our general stuff. Let's talk about technologies associated with the shoes to give it the spring. So in the Mach 5, we do have the ProFly Plus, which is this top layer of foam that's being used here. And similar to the Mach 4, the ProFly is like this spongier, springier foam, which it's supposed to act in a similar way to the Zoom X that would be in the case of, the Nike brand shoes, where it's a little bit lighter, it's a bit spongier, and it's going to give you more oomph, more bounce when you're running. So the Mach 5 isn't supposed to be marketed as some sort of recovery shoe, but it will work for your recovery days, but it's going to be slower. Well, not slower. It's going to be faster than your recovery pace if you allow the shoe to go in that sort of direction. And then, of course, the outsole here is this EVA foam with no additional reinforcement of any sort. It's just straight EVA. And this kind of goes into one of my concerns with this particular shoe in comparison to the Vomero 16, which is that the lifespan of this shoe is in jeopardy only because there isn't so much reinforcement. So just something to think about when you're running with this particular shoe. If you've got a slightly aggressive strike like I do, if you're running on hills and you've got a lot of downhills and you're trying to brake while you're running, you'll see wear and tear in places that you would not normally see on the shoe, or things like that. So that's a consideration if you're thinking lifespan in terms of your daily trainer. So as we move into the Vomero 16, we have a couple of different things going on here, as you can probably guess. We do have Zoom X foam running across the shoe here, this lighter foam. Zoom X historically has been used on the Vaporfly, has been used on the Alpha Fly, a lot of racing shoes, and some other daily trainers more intended for speed. So the Vomero 16 is in a sense supposed to be a nice fast shoe, but it's also kind of marketed to be your long distance trainer in terms of like comfort and durability, and just kind of giving you a good feel during a longer run overall. And what it helps with that in this feature, I guess, here is this darker foam here, which is this SR02 carrier foam, which doesn't really get talked about a lot. It's neither ZoomX nor React. It's something in between, I think, just to kind of give you a good cushioning for your foot, and like particularly this midfoot like heel area if you're that kind of a striker. So I haven't noticed anything significant about it while I was running, but it is there. It's been good so far, so no complaints about SR02 in this particular instance. Now in the outsole, again, we have a full rubber covering across the ZoomX foam here, which is what I like. It's got good setup for lugs, but at this point in time you can see I got like over 300 plus miles on it. I've really burnt some of the lugs in this forefoot area, but that's kind of like, expected. But I have enjoyed it at this point in time. It does, however, make a lot more noise than the Mach 5 when you're running in this particular shoe. I don't know if that's a function of the rubber, a function of the lugs, a function of the Air Zoom pod pocket in the forefoot area of this shoe, which is also the technology being associated with this shoe, or a combination of all of it. So that's just something worth noting. So yeah, as I mentioned, there is an Air Zoom pod, kind of similar to like in the Pegasus series and other shoes, right here in the forefoot area to give you an extra spring with the shoe. Whereas the Mach 5 does not have any additional like Air Zoom pods in the shoe. It's just EVA and ProFly Plus. So that's another thing to consider. In the uppers, I would say that this upper is not as breathable as the Mach 5, but this is still a relatively good breathable upper when compared to other shoes that you see on the market. Now again, this upper, I guess people call it ugly. I never really thought about it that way. I honestly just think it's like, it is the design, it is what it is. It's fine. I have no issues with it. It doesn't have the same lockdown, I would say, as the Mach 5 does, and that's where the Mach 5 really excels, is this pillow-like lockdown and this excellent design that has been an upgrade since the Mach 4, which also had a really excellent lockdown. And that, of course, is the design associated with this heel, which has a really good heel cup inside the shoe. It's got this nice gusseted tongue to basically just wrap around your foot a proper way, kind of like the Vaporfly series of the Nike shoe. And then, of course, the upper itself is just a really good fit. It's not too wide and it's not too thin, at least in my particular case. Now, another feature that's similar to both shoes is that within the Mach 5 there is this sock liner, as you can see right about there somewhere on the sides of the shoe, that is basically taking up closer to the mid to the forefoot area of your shoe. And the Vomero 16 has something similar as well, but it's just covering, basically the entire midfoot area of your foot. And I think it's been a good idea for both shoes to have this. I do just like the minimalist design within the Mach 5 in terms of having this sock liner. Again, it's an apples and oranges kind of build overall, because it's a brand kind of style and niche per shoe, so that's kind of the thing to note there, of course. Now let's talk about some of, I guess, utilities for both shoes. So as I mentioned earlier, the Vomero 16 was marketed as this daily trainer that is more specialized in your shoe lineup to be a distance runner. Now, with that marketing considered and how I've run with it in the past, I can see that being definitely the case. The most I've put in this shoe is about 11.5 miles before, it was just really hot and my feet start sweating and the shoe gets a little bit heavy, and two, there's a bit of soreness that kind of develops in the peroneal tendon area. Not necessarily because of this shoe, but maybe because of external things that have happened, whether it's in my case, maybe overtraining, maybe running in carbon plate shoes and wearing out, some of the muscles in these particular areas of my foot. There's a couple of those things going on in which that could have been the case as to why there was some soreness here. It's not, a shoe that's designed for recovery necessarily, not like the Infinity React. So that's just something important to consider, is if you're in tip-top shape, you're not really injured, you're not sore for any reason, this is a shoe that I think will consistently ride with you to the distances that you want to go for a long period of time. And now, as I mentioned before, I do have like 300 plus miles on this shoe. The left foot is relatively okay, but if we look at like the right foot, for example, I've really like burnt out the majority of the lugs here. So I do experience some slip if I'm like running in the rain, or if I'm going down a hill, I'll feel like the foot kind of pivot a little bit. So 300 plus miles in this shoe for my particular strike has been pretty good so far. But I have not run in this shoe in a little while because A, I got more shoes to test in my lineup, and B, I'm like pretty much teetering on the edge of calling this shoe quits and just, you know, shelving it and just saying, hey, the Vomero 16 was a good time. If I'm like training distance and I need a Nike shoe that's like, you know, comfortable and distance friendly, this is probably the avenue that I will go into. So those are my thoughts with the Vomero 16 in terms of its marketing. Now with the Mach 5, not too much marketing I hear about it in terms of like what they say it's like the best shoe for, but if I had to predict what it was, I think they're going to say that this is like the everyday trainer shoe that you should buy. And I suspect they probably say that a lot about their shoes, like, you know, all of them, whether it's like the Cliftons, the Arahis, etc. But if I had to put a spin on it, I would say the Mach 5 is probably more in the echelon of like a daily speed trainer without a carbon plate type of shoe. And I think that would be a fairly correct assessment, knowing that, you know, this ProFly is just an extraordinarily fast foam. Again, kind of like Zoom X. The shoe itself is just streamlined, it's quick, and I don't have anything bad to say about it. Again, other than the con I mentioned before, that the EVA foam life is extremely questionable, and I'll be lucky if I can get it past 200 plus miles. Maybe 250 is like a good cap. If I get it into 300 without breaking into the ProFly through the EVA, that would be also pretty sick. But again, it's too soon to tell. I don't know if there were any massive improvements in the EVA foam between the Mach 4 and Mach 5. I'm leaning on the side of no, that they probably, they being HOKA, understood that the Mach 4 design was just like pristine, people loved it, so all they needed to do was just add an upgraded foam, do a few tweaks to the upper, and just keep the rest the same. So I will agree with that decision, but again, we don't know yet how long this shoe is going to last for somebody who runs as like aggressively and as daily as I do. So we'll see how that plays out. So the last thing I'd probably discuss is price for both shoes. I remember buying this one for about $140 on HOKA's website, and I am in the process of exchanging it to a different color scheme, and the shoe still will cost about the same. I remember the Vomero 16 costing about $160. So there's a $20 difference in terms of both shoes, but the question then you have to ask yourself is, do you want a shoe that's going to last a few miles longer than the Mach 5? And are you, you know, a Nike loyalist, and will you enjoy and like, do you do distance running as part of your training? Because if so, the Vomero 16 is probably a good pick. If, you know, you want to stay in the Nike family, you do daily training, you want that pop in your step, this is a good shoe to lean towards in that case. But now, if you're not really brand specific, or if you're a HOKA One loyalist, and you want something that's going to be quick, that can be flexible in a lot of your different kind of runs, you want something that's kind of fun and flashy in this particular case, but you're not sure about the lifespan of the shoe necessarily in terms of like your particular stride or historically how other shoes have lasted in your lineup, and you want a shoe for shorter distance runs but can also apply it for longer distances if necessary, I think the Mach 5 is a pretty good pick overall in this case. Whereas like for shorter distance running, there's, I think, better options than the Vomero 16. That's just my opinion. So I think that's where we're going to leave this particular comparison video for both shoes. So for me, it's an apples and oranges of which one I would use. Usually I like to default to the Mach series HOKA Ones over a lot of Nike shoes. So that's kind of where my heart is right now, is in like the Mach 4, Mach 5 family over, in this case, the Vomero 16. Because if there's a shoe that you can run fast in, personally, I like that shoe a lot, and I will sometimes trade comfort and speed, or comfort in for speed in a lot of instances. So if you can get a shoe that can do both, which is comfortable and, you know, speedy, that's kind of the shoe I lean towards versus something that will last me in more of an endurance kind of standpoint. So that's the questions you should ask yourself ultimately when it comes to comparing these. So those are my thoughts on these shoes. If you have, if you share similar opinions or have like different experiences with both shoes in terms of lifespan, comfort, etc., let me know in the comments below. But I think we're going to end this comparison video here. So thanks so much for watching. See you guys in the next one.